Can you take a suburban property and in under a year and on a limited budget turn it into a self-sufficient, sustainable permaculture food forest? I have no idea, but we're gonna find out. And I already have some permaculture designers who are really keen to help me out with this project so that everyone can learn from them. Now, I do have a fair bit of a green thumb. I've been veggie gardening for about 8 years now, but I've always been doing what I'm kind of calling fancy veggie gardening, where the way that I've been doing it involves buying a lot of fertilizers, building really nice garden beds that are quite expensive. But what I have realized over the last couple of years is that gardening doesn't have to be expensive. And so the point of this project is to take a lot of the things that I've learned over that journey, push my own boundaries and see if I can do something really incredible for really cheap. Because the reason that I started this whole channel was to make gardening more accessible and approachable for everyone. Because one thing that I really know now is how easy it is to save money on a lot of aspects of gardening and get started for free and really cheap. And not do things like spend lots of money on potting mix and seedlings and expensive raised beds. And over my whole gardening journey, I've always been super organized and super structured. Garden beds where I plant things in rows and I measure how far apart I plant them. I plan out my succession sowing in spreadsheets. I've been that sort of gardener, but I've realized that there's a better way. In fact, let me show you. Over this last summer, for the first time in basically my whole gardening journey, I hit proper gardening fatigue. I basically stopped coming outside. I stopped watering my plants. I stopped fertilizing a lot of it. And yes, a lot of my crops died, but what I found interesting was that a lot of them didn't. A lot of them thrived. And a fair few of them went well beyond that. An example here is my spring onions that there was 3 or 4 left in the bed that all completely went to flower, went to seed. And now here I am 6 months later, and now I have more spring onions than I've ever had before. The same thing with my lettuces. I didn't plant any of this. With my snow peas over there were a couple of pods that I let dry off on the trellis. And then when I decided to clean up the garden a couple months ago, I came by and realized there was snow pea peas sitting on that bed. I just pushed them in and walked away and didn't think about it. And now I've already got snow peas coming through. The other thing that happened is a lot of the veggies that were in this part of the garden started to get really overtaken by aphids. And dealing with that over and over again is one of the things that made me really start to hit that garden fatigue and just couldn't be bothered coming out anymore. And for me, that's crazy. I am the typical every single morning comes out, looks over every plant type of gardener. I really enjoy that aspect of it. And I was just totally done with it. But what happened when I left a garden full of aphids is eventually all of the aphid predators have moved in. And now that I'm a couple months along back into my gardening journey and I've got my winter crops starting to come through, there's not a single aphid in sight. One of the things that was a bit appealing at first about this house is how every garden bed is covered in this really nice white stone material. But now having a bunch of exposed beds and realizing how great self-seeding is, there's now just these big pits of death that just line most parts of the property. Here are some of the big challenges we're going to have to overcome. Number 1, getting rid of all of those rocks and stones in all of the garden beds everywhere around the house. The next thing is getting rid of most of the non-edible plants in the entire garden, which is all of these huge trees along the back, the huge row of hedges in the backyard, the big row of hedges in the front, the big row of hedges near the driveway. There's a little front garden as well that gets heaps of sun that I think can be really valuable for part of this project, but it's full of really deep-rooted grassy types, a massive banksia, and a lily-pilly tree, which I probably will leave there. Honestly, I think the single biggest challenge that we're gonna have to overcome is actually this, my kikuyu grass. Because kikuyu is very invasive. I thought I did a pretty decent job of weed matting these garden beds, but this front part that touches the most grass, I'm starting to get the kikuyu runners. Look, there's even one here. I'm starting to get the kikuyu runners really starting to come up through it. Any in-ground beds that we do, that's gonna be a massive problem that we're gonna have to deal with. The next challenge that we'll have to overcome, I think, will resonate with everyone, and that's to stick to a pretty strict budget. For a couple reasons. Number 1, I really want to show that self-sufficiency or versions of it are something that are genuinely achievable without having to fork out big expenses at the start. In order to stay within that budget, I've already started collecting a bunch of things that we're going to use for the project. So I've got some strawberries here that have been propagated from a friend's strawberry patch. These are grapevine cuttings. To get these, I put a post on my local veggie gardening group asking if someone had some grapevines that I could come and take some cuttings from, and a nice old lady said yes. I went out, I took some cuttings, but then she also said, hey, if you want, there's actually a whole grapevine that I'll dig out for you if you want it. So I've actually got a bare rooted grapevine. Spaced around the place, I've got a bunch of perennial herbs. These have all come from nursery clearance. These were $1 each, that's only $3 there, free free. I've started propagating as much of it as possible. This is a little basil plant from this dwarf pomegranate tree that we got for $2. Chamomile plant that we got for $2. Dwarf peach tree that was about $12. I've already repotted it. Rhubarb plants, they were $1 each. Some hop vines, those were $2 each. I already have these veggie beds, but this is only about 5 square meters of growing space. I already have 4 or 5 fruit trees that are ready to replace these as soon as we bring them out. I have a very decent library of seeds. There's still some that we'll have to buy, but probably not too much. Behind my shed, I do have a good little compost area. Nice big compost bins at the back, and then this is where I put mostly house food scraps that then eventually go back into that compost. Something that I already have that's gonna help heaps is a 2100 litre rainwater tank. However, kinda currently doesn't do anything. The tap from the bottom works, but the connection isn't anything standard, so I've got to work out how to change that. And in here, behind a broken handle, is a pump that's connected to the house, but it doesn't turn on, and I can't find out any information about it. And then one of the other big goals, and one of the reasons that I think this project will appeal to a lot of people, is that I still want to maintain the vibe of having a big backyard and not just have the full thing be food production. If it was just me, I would overtake the entire yard with garden beds, but I have kids and I still want them to have the ability to have a swing set and a trampoline and enough space to run around and that sort of thing. So trying to make an ultra productive, lazy, low maintenance food garden, and even with all the constraints, all of the tough work that's going to be ahead, the budget that I really want to stick to, trying to have it be ultra productive in such a small footprint, I actually think that this is something that's going to be quite possible. So I really hope that you're willing to follow along on this journey with me. Click subscribe. I'll see you next time when I'm going to cut out nearly every single plant at my house. See you next time.
Is this really happening? I can't believe it's true. I'm just as surprised as you.